With war, rolling Atlas Thug, we here to bring the truth. Jar open this podcast, we breaking through the fake news. They try to silence us, but we will be subdued. We're bearded alpha males here to save the youth. Spitting fire on the mic with the bass Christian takes. Exposing the lies, keeping the demons at bay. We ain't afraid to speak up, we won't be swayed. Jar open this podcast, where the truth is laid. Jar openers, cracking open the lies. We're rolling Atlas Thug, we're here to rise. Bearded alpha males saving the youth from the godless demons, spreading the truth. We ain't playing games, we're on a mission to awaken the masses with our intuition. Pulling out the corruption with no inhibition. Jar open this podcast, sparking a revolution. We're not afraid to stand tall in a world full of deceit. We're the voice of reason, bringing light to the street. Keeping it real, never missing a beat. Jar open this podcast, where the truth meets the heat. Jar openers, cracking open the lies. We're rolling Atlas Thug, we're here to rise. Bearded alpha males saving the youth from the godless demons, spreading the truth. Jar open this podcast, where the truth will never cease. Join us on the journey to bring back peace. We're rolling Atlas Thug, fearless in our release. Jar open this podcast, where the lies will decrease.
All right. Oh, wait. I'm all dark. Turn some lights on here.
You go see that mug.
I'm ready now. Well, welcome in, everybody. Jar Openers Podcast, episode 16. We're streaming on Rumble for the first time. It's a couple extra steps, so hopefully it's worth it. I did a little test stream earlier, a couple of them, and I had 3 people watching. I was just doing a little test with no title. So if that's any indicator, hopefully it'll be worth it, right? With a title and a thumbnail and everything now. But
yeah, make it fancy.
Yeah, right. I'm Tyler. I'm the host of America First TV, and this is my co-host here, Atlas Thugged. He just had
Atlas Thugged.
Yeah, I was gonna say he just had his first baby. Well, he didn't have it. We don't believe in that. But his
my wife had it.
had their first baby, and last Friday. So those of you know, he wasn't here for Saturday's show. We go live every Wednesday and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern time. We usually run for 2 hours, but lately it's been running longer. But let them know a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, resident Christian nationalist. Had my daughter 5 days ago. I got about 100 times more radical in the aftermath of that, especially seeing a lot of stuff regarding Jeff's younger story, which we'll get into a little bit later. Number 1 Kansas City Chief hater. Also could probably say the same thing about Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes.
You don't say
but
that.
really just yeah, no, right. People who don't know, I don't wear it enough as much as Worrell has his, but I am a Chargers fan. But thank you for everybody who said congratulations. We appreciate it. She's doing really well. Her name is Eowyn Eilish Shepherd. She's named after the Lord of the Rings maiden, shield maiden, the daughter of King Theoden, King of Rohan. So we gave her a pretty fighter name, and we're just taking it day by day and hopefully trying to rest in the meantime.
Nice. That's awesome. So we're gonna pretty much start off with, you want to start off with the whole, yeah, that's probably what we should do, the whole World War III thing. I mean, that's pretty much the hot topic that probably needs to be addressed the most. But as most of you probably know, Biden authorized that Ukraine use America's long-range missiles against targets in Russia, apparently. So we're gonna get into that a little bit. Seeing some new people here in chat, so it's nice to see you here. KP, Second Amendment Rights, and Corduroy G. Let's see here. What did he say? What do you have to say? No, man, they're going to cause millions of deaths in World War III. Just trying to make Trump look bad. Going to give a flying F about Americans. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's pretty much. Well, you summed it up. Show's over. 100%. I think just off the top, I think they're trying to make the situation so bad intentionally, so that Trump can't deliver or have a harder time delivering on his promise that he would have that war wrapped up in 24 hours within his inauguration. Anything the left can do to make Trump look bad, even if it's at our expense, the people's expense, they're gonna do it.
I think it's a bit more sinister than that. I think what we're going to end up seeing with such a radical action here, this is something that you had Putin say way earlier. I mean, this has probably been in the last year, a long time ago, saying that something on this level would constitute an act of war. And then, I think it goes a bit sinister in terms of why they did it, maybe why he would authorize it. It's hard to actually win or transfer any kind of power when you're under martial law. To say we do get into wartime, right? They're gonna get the argument of, well, hey, we can't transfer power to Trump right now. We're in the middle of military operations. There's gonna be chaos. So hopefully it doesn't take that direction.
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully, it doesn't take that direction for sure. Let me. We're scrambling here at the last second, which is why we're a few minutes late. We almost didn't have an intro song today. It wasn't playing right, but then that put me a little bit behind. Let's pull up this first story. This is from a couple of days ago, but Biden authorizes Ukraine. Ukraine. Biden authorizes Ukraine to use U.S. long-range missiles to strike inside of Russia. Russian President Vladimir Putin has said such escalations would be an act of war. And I saw, before we get into the article, actually, I wanted to say, much love to you too there, Southeast Trucking. But I wanted to say I saw in an argument over on Pierce Morgan's show, one person was basically saying, hey, look, an escalation here in this manner is I'm drawing a blank on who the actual people were, but it's always, kind of left versus right on that show. One person was saying, President Putin, Vladimir Putin has promised that an escalation like this, could lead to his use of nuclear weapons. And the response from the person on the left was, this is the third time that he's threatened to use nuclear weapons, and look what he's done. Nothing so far. Do you really think he would do that? It would amount to the obliteration of him and all of his people and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, man, y'all are some bald jerks. Like, you're really
Right.
just, you're okay with all that fallout and all that, death and everything like that. And you're so, brazen to think that that's actually how it would really just truly go down. A lot of people think once one country pushes the button, every country pushes the button. And I don't know if I believe that to be true, but that's kind of the common conception, I guess.
They think they have the moral high ground, right?
Yeah,
You spray enough of Putin is, Putin's literally Hitler. They haven't been doing as much as they have been with Donald Trump, but you just have the title of a dictator. It means, well, you can do whatever you want, right? These are the same people who preach tolerance when it comes to literally any other issue, but punch a Nazi is okay, right? And so
right.
there seems to be some kind of purview they carry, which is as long as you have the moral high ground, you can punch down, sideways, up, it doesn't matter. So they could care less about the fallout. They have no ability to even separate the people of versus the governments of. And so it's just unfortunate. Nobody wants all of these millions of people to die. And let alone if it goes to these certain levels, and you do have Russia sitting here being like, well, not only is the US committing an act of war, but NATO allowing all of this is committing an act of war, which if people aren't aware, Great Britain and France has also authorized different, I think they're called SCLP missiles to be used too. And so Russia's already made statements on that as well. And so next thing you know, Russia's like, okay, send a nuke over here, send a nuke over there, send a nuke over there. And be like, hey, because we're not playing. And then
Right.
what then, right? You get mass fallout.
And it's not always like the giant nuclear bombs. There's smaller nuclear ammunitions as well that could be used. But the initial warning from Vladimir Putin is, I think it's funny because I only remember one warning from before. I don't remember the second one, but the initial one was like, hey, don't use nuclear powered anything against us. And then NATO sent in these tanks that were nuclear powered, like engines or something like that. Um, and kind of just slowly but surely has been escalating, the attack against Putin. And it's funny because I feel like the US and NATO are kind of behaving much like the liberals do, the Democrats do within our own country. They like to um attack and attack and attack and virtue signal and try to rally the people and things like that, um, using media and whatever. And then eventually, once their prey, the people that they're bullying, the country that they're bullying has been backed into a corner, they lash out, whether it's with words or they fight, and then that becomes the big story that their opponent did this, and then they're free reign to do whatever they want to do, after that. And it's like, wait a minute, just because that person finally attacked back one time, fought back for themselves after being backed into the corner and had nowhere else to go, uh, that's the bad person. That's the bad country. Yeah, depleted uranium shell.
Yep.
I see there.
For a minimum nuclear fallout or radiation, I should say.
Yeah. So, let me check something here real quick. I'm gonna continue with this story, but
No,
I
you're
want to
good.
make sure we're up Rumble.
Well, while World was checking that, one thing I wanted to add too, see, I think this is one of the things, I think there's a litany of things that need to be investigated as soon as Trump takes office. But I think, in particular, um, the people who have been behind this Ukraine war that's escalated these tensions purposefully, when there's been multiple attempts that either side could have reached across the aisle for a ceasefire. And you also look at the fact that the only reason Ukraine's been able to at least put up the pitiful fight that it has so far is because the exorbitant amount of resources not only the US and other nations have dumped into it. I think every single one of those people need to be tried for sedition. Probably doesn't definitionally fit the description of treason. But I think that this is one of those situations where you don't care what the optics look like. You immediately start using, the justice system for its actual intended purpose and getting these people locked behind bars. I really truly hope Trump has the actual kind of the willpower to get it done. I hope that he doesn't have people in this cabinet and people surrounding him telling him, no, we don't want to be, you don't want to be called a fascist while you're president. And it's like, I think that there's a certain amount of justice that's required for things of this level that are this kind of evil. And this article is one of the big ones. It's really not many other big developments have happened besides them cutting the deep sea cables. But one of the things I wanted to point to too is they've already laid out different peace plans. I guess I say peace plans, but really the ceasefire. And it would require a demilitarized zone, similar to what we see in North Korea and South Korea. Kind of like a huge long border and strip of land that's now considered nobody's. And it'll have probably all the different rules and regulations that exist between North Korea and South Korea, where it's armed guards and are 24/7. The war's not really ever technically over, but it kind of is just because everybody kind of stopped shooting. And I believe a few other things in there that you can find in the article that was such an about, I think it's like a 20-year deal to not pursue NATO membership as well. So there's been plans that's laid out. Ukraine's only in a position to negotiate because the rest of NATO is giving them a bunch of stuff, and resources and things of that nature too, and now weaponry. And it's just hard to not look at us as the empire in this situation.
Yeah. Sorry, I got it all worked out over there on Rumble. I was wanting to make sure that it was up and that the chat was working, so I apologize for that little bit. But I completely agree with you that it's time to essentially hold these people's feet to the fire. I've actually been saying it in some of my daily videos that we've seen like Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski recently go and meet with Trump in Mar-a-Lago. They're basically I guess they had 20,000 views in the key demographic over the weekend, which I'll get that usually in a day. It's just any particular day. Which is interesting considering I'm just, a dude on YouTube talking into a camera. But it's like a lot of these people are now realizing, with the appointment of Matt Gaetz as I always want to call him district attorney. I know it's not. It's attorney general. Goodness gracious. I don't know why, but district attorney always comes to my mind. The appointment of Matt
enough.
Gaetz, the district attorney general. They're kind of seeing there's a lot of projection from the left, and they always accuse there's two things. They always accuse, their enemies, their foes of doing what they would do or what they're actually doing. And so they're projecting onto Matt Gaetz the way that they would be treated, just because they're essentially, that's the way that they've supported treating Donald Trump and his cohorts and even his supporters and stuff like that over the years. And so they expect it. And then now they're all kind of coming out here uh, saying, we need to come together. We need bipartisan things and this and that. And it's like, nah, you've had your opportunity. I told people in a video today that's going to be coming out tomorrow that, you know, uh, in the face of all these mainstream media people out here saying, don't go to Thanksgiving if with your MAGA family, just stay home and stuff like that. I'm saying if you're MAGA, man, deck out. Put your flag shirt on, put your flag hat on, put your MAGA hat on, show up, make them feel as uncomfortable as possible. If they want to say anything, it's all lies. Just correct them with the truth. And if they want to leave, then that's on them. You know what I mean? So we got the
Yep.
majority of the country behind us. That Trump won the popular vote, and it's I believe in forgiveness and being kind to others and stuff. But at this point, when it comes to this, we hired Trump to do a job, and I stand behind all of his appointments and his cabinet appointments and stuff like that. Even the questionable ones. I at least believe in Trump and that he's gonna get it done. If these people fail, he'll fire them, unlike Joe Biden.
Well, yeah, I think that's you bring up a good point too. Like, especially as long as term limits are a thing, Trump's not going to be able to run for a third term. So this
Yeah,
argument of like, oh, we got to make sure we care about the optics and such is just to what end, I guess. Even if JD Vance doesn't believe it, play the same game the left has done. And so as soon as JD Vance wants to run, or Matt Gaetz, whoever's in this position to run on the Republican ticket,
right.
you say, oh wow, yeah, I really can't believe Trump did that. I quietly disagreed with him during my term. Play that kind of game as well. But I also think if optics is what we're worried about in the end all be all, we're worried about the wrong things.
It's a losing
Because
recipe.
yeah, and you have people who've committed, blatant sedition, right? And sucks. Is there an actual law saying he can't run again? Yes. So this was actually because of FDR. When FDR, I believe, was the only president that served 3 terms. I think every other presidency either served 1 or 2. FDR, because he implemented so many programs and had such a bad track record towards the end of his presidency, which is funny, and I appreciate that, Sock. Thank you. Which at the end of it too, he has a lot of similarities to Joe Biden, because FDR is the president who was wheeled around in a wheelchair for an extended period of time before the general public knew what was going on, before they knew how bad it was. And so, regarding just how much executive authority he garnered under those 3 terms, it was then pushed through to limit the president to 2 terms. But the main point stands is like, there's no one to please now, right? You won, like you're in office now. Like, do whatever you have to. This is your second term. This is your strong-handed term. It is like, do the dirty work that we've been asking you as our constituents, as the electorate body for quite some time. Put an end to these wars, put an end to this deep state, this bureaucracy, because I'm going to be extremely disappointed if we ran this campaign and we garnered all of this public support for gutting all these agencies out, only for us to get to month 6 or 7 and absolutely nothing's been done. No one's been put in jail. And because then it's just like you've lost all the momentum that the Republican Party just gained under Trump, and you're
Mhm.
going to squander it out once again. And so those are things I really don't want to see.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And it's funny because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. The left, all these folks, they ran with Trump's going to be a dictator from day one, and he's going to rule like Hitler, and all this stuff like that. But it's like he's going to go after his political enemies, and it's like, well, first of all, we're desensitized to that because that's the game that you guys play. Look at all the cases that they brought against Donald Trump, the Rico, Fannie Willis, how corrupt she is.
Right.
Um, the case in New York where Judge Marchand basically just put the sentencing on hold indefinitely. That's basically going away. The 34 felonies. It's I wouldn't be surprised if Marchand ends up dismissing the case just outright. It makes the 34
Yep.
felonies just go away. But like I was saying, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that, you know, because they've expected so much. First, it was fear mongering. Trump's going to be a dictator, but at the same time, they're trying to they're going to go back to it. They're going to fall back to it as soon as Donald Trump starts removing the people that they say are Trump's enemies. But it's like, are they Trump's enemies because Trump doesn't like them, or are they Trump's enemies because they threw the first punch at Donald Trump and now he has the power? The American people have spoke and we back Donald Trump. Hey, what's up, Chris?
Yep.
Um, and so they're gonna run out there and they're gonna cry again about, look at him, he's being a fascist, he's being this and that. And at this point, you know what? Put on the gas. I don't want to see Donald Trump go out there and try to make friends with the left like he did in his first term. I feel like he spent a lot of time trying to win over the Democrats, the people at least, and they just hate him, and they hate us for liking him. And so it's just like, recognize the playing ground, the playground, the game board, and just go forward with the people, and to support the people that elected you and got you into the position. And we see a lot of that reflecting in his cabinet appointments. Really, frankly, I think he's off to a
Yep.
good start, but they're going to try to do anything they can in this lame duck session for Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and whoever's running them. Thanks, Obama. And and oh no, I've been cracking myself up with the thanks Obama stuff lately. It just will never get old. But
Right.
they're going to use this lame duck session to make everything as hard on Trump as they possibly can, and it's at our expense. It's at the people's expense. And so, I'm looking forward to seeing any of these Republicans that don't go with his cabinet appointments being primaried in their next elections. I'll go as hard as I can on this channel to support these folks being primaried. Um, it's time to stop the partisan charade and just do what's right for the everyday average American that's living check to check and just trying to make ends meet. People that can't even afford to buy a house or start a family. We need to restore the American dream that our fathers promised to us, that we're passing down to our kids. Back to that, having an opportunity. Hey, what's up, Michael? Good to see you here.
Listen, I'm one of those guys who I'm a far right extremist, as they would say. I wish Donald Trump was as base as the Democrats play him out to be. Right. Like I really wish, like I would honestly, like if he just acted upon the stuff that he ran on and in the form of a dictator, I could care less. Because that's at the level of like I just want things to stop being so fake, so homosexual, so just busted, dysfunctional. We're having an invasion at the southern border. Like I'm one of the guys who's like, I could care less how it gets done, just like let's get it done. And this, I heard an argument from Tim Pool talking about the optics, I believe, on Monday. And what's up, Chris? And he seems really, really focused on the fact that he doesn't want Trump to look bad. And again, I thought Andrew Wilson brought up a good point. This is the guy who was like, he called Rosie O'Donnell a pig. He was like literally to Hillary Clinton's face. He was like, because he'd be in jail, like people were cheering for him. It's like the optics that the people wanted that were positive for him were the ones when he left that mainstream media, um, holier than thou, always having the moral high ground of we're never going to offend anybody. We're always going to play like this neutral ball. Like he left that and was like, no, I'm going to say what I want. I'm going to say what I think I should say, and I'll just be off the cuff. And people loved it.
Yeah.
And it's not for everybody. There are people who genuinely disagree with him, who even are conservative, who are like, I wish you would just talk a little bit better. But when I look at the stories like Lake and Riley, and we're going to talk about Jeff Younger and what's happened to him with the court rulings in California, it's like I'm sorry, like I'm my back's set against the wall. It's like if my option is to pick a global communism that pushes nonstop LGBTQ plus AI propaganda, or a guy who mouths off and may not be the most perfect Christian avatar, but
Presidential.
incrementally, yeah, presidential, not professional, whatever it means. It's
Mhm.
like I'm going to take that guy 10 times out of 10 times, because the other option is not even just bad or poor, it's evil, and it degrades the actual foundation of this nation. I mean, we're talking about like debasing children and having things like, Kamala was gonna pay for the sex change surgeries of illegal immigrants in jail. It's like, what even is this headline? Like, who's supporting this stuff? Like, this is insane. And
Right.
so it's gotten to a point where it's like, I could care less. The guy could come out and he could say that he wants to shoot someone on Fifth Avenue. I'd be like, well, is he going to stop the invasion of the southern border? Because I'll take it. That's where I'm at.
Right. And, I just feel like by the time you're in your 70s, you are who you are, right? And even before that, people still learn and whatever, but Donald Trump has always been a New York businessman. You know what I mean? He's not going to be this presidential acting dude, and he's made his billions of dollars by uh, you know, being good at TV. Obviously, he pretty much has the camera down. The camera loves him and he loves it. But at the same time, you know, he can be crass, he can be really funny. And that's how you become successful as a salesperson at that level. You got to be able to sell ketchup popsicle to a woman in white gloves, essentially. And Donald Trump, I think, has that charisma. And so by the time you're in your 70s, expecting him to come out there and be presidential and not be himself, I think was, just an off base expectation. And so, over the last few years, especially, I've come to realize that, a lot of people wanted him to be more presidential. A lot of people wanted him to be, more properly political and this and that. And it's like, you know what? Just he is what he is. I don't care if he calls Rosie O'Donnell fat and ugly. I mean, I don't know if you guys have seen that recent picture of her going around on X, but she's not looking that great.
He wasn't wrong.
And so, just saying, right? And then, that's who we called fat. And then the mainstream media talking point is he calls women fat. No, he called Rosie O'Donnell fat. Okay. It's like they
Yep.
just have to conflate everything and make it just so much worse when they're speaking of him and anything that comes to his people or his ideas. And so it's just it's a shame, but my hope is that people's lives get so much better over these next 4 years, that all of that fringe bullshit that the mainstream media has been focusing on, that brainwashed a lot of people, brainwashed these women into not wanting to have sex, and the 4B movement, and they're shaving their heads and all this stuff,
Yeah.
just literal painful. Like, I saw a video today of Alan Lichtman, the dude that has predicted 9 of the last 10 elections and predicted that Kamala would win this one, repeating all these talking points from the mainstream media. And it's like, bro, the liberal hive mind virus is real and it's infected you. And hopefully, 4 years of
Yeah.
having money in the bank and having less cost at the gas pump, maybe even some hope for healthcare costs going down, and Social Security possibly getting better, the streets being safer, the country, the border being safer. People will come to their senses and realize that this shit's way more important than the crazy fringe stuff that the left has had me focused on over those last 8 years. Really, that's my hope. You know what I mean? But unfortunately, I think
Yep.
a lot of these people are gonna, time will tell. But I think a lot of these people might just be too infected by it. But I
Yeah,
see
well, I think it's wild that my bad. I was just gonna say I thought it was wild that you take Cenk Uyghur's side. And I did too when you're watching that little Piers Morgan clip where he's like,
yeah,
dude, you're watching Cenk, who's also kind of insane, but
he's
to a lesser degree
a
than Alan
left-wing
Lichtman is.
populist is how he describes himself, even though I don't believe he's populist at all. But
Right.
you start going like, holy crap, did I just agree with Jink? Like, what the
Yeah.
hell just happened? I guess whenever
Yeah.
blue fights blue, there's still gonna be some kind of winner. But yeah, I made a video on that today. It's gonna come out tomorrow, and I thought that was really, really good. But I see Dave's in chat. What's up, Dave? And I saw who else was here? Jamie. Hey, Jamie.
Yeah. Jamie looks like Sean Wilson as well. And Michael.
Yeah, Michael.
Appreciate everybody for being here.
Yeah. See you guys. Appreciate you being here. Make sure everybody hits that like button. Share these videos with your friends. All that type of stuff. Probably don't ask enough. But let's get back to this article here involving the long-range missiles. President Biden has authorized Ukraine's military to use U.S.-provided long-range missiles on targets inside Russian territory. Senior U.S. officials confirmed to Fox News on Sunday. You know, U.S. long range missiles, in my opinion, should be in U.S. control, not Ukraine's control. And you know, don't give me this crap that it provides jobs in the U.S., so it's actually good. I'm not falling for that shit. The senior U.S. officials said the weapons will mostly focus on the Kursk region of Western Russia. The decision was first reported by the New York Times. According to the official, Biden's decision was spurred by the Russian decision to invite 10,000 North Korean soldiers into the fight against Ukraine and Kursk. A second official told Fox that it's unclear if Biden plans to approve the use of the missiles outside of the Kursk region. Well, it might not happen now, but it's just progressively getting worse and worse and worse. So, I mean, if not now, then probably later, right? Um, this lame duck session by any president. This right here is an example of why I don't think that a president should have to wait 2.5 months ever again post election. Maybe a couple weeks, but not even really. I mean, president should probably be inaugurated within a week of the election just to prevent this type of nonsense crap from happening. I mean, Joe Biden shouldn't be making decisions like this at such a pivotal point of time where he's on the way out. You know, there's no saving the presidency for Joe Biden at all. And
Right.
it's just so improper for him to be approving and doing such a dramatic thing. I mean, this is a response, they say, to 10,000 North Korean soldiers going to fight against Ukraine, but we've known about BRICS for 2 years now. BRICS has been like solidified as a counter to NATO, which is what is the B? Is that Brazil? I always forget.
Yeah, yeah. It's Brazil,
Russian. The
Russia, Iran, China, Syria, I believe is what the S stands for. And then it also involves Turkey.
in
And
India.
there's a couple other bigger ones as well.
Is
I
it?
believe
Is it?
India is part of it
I
as well
think
now
India
too.
is the I, and then Iran was added later. And it's just getting bigger and bigger, and it's a direct result of NATO's overreach, and you know, because
South
this whole
Africa.
South Africa, okay, and so I mean, when they start having their allies, I mean, as soon as China jumps in, I mean, how is this not World War III? You have like all the superpowers involved. It almost pretty much could be described as World War III right now.
Well,
Multiple
I mean,
countries involved, boots on the ground.
just think
U.S.
about logistically, right? Think about the fact of Ukraine goes, Daddy United States, can we bomb Russia? And the US goes, yeah, go ahead. Use these missiles. And then we want to say, like, we're not involved, guys. Like, we're not at war with Russia. And it's
Right,
like, like that doesn't make any sense. You know, like,
right,
it's like, but the media is doing everything amongst themselves to be like, no, like, look at what Russia and Ukraine are doing. And it's like, dude, if Ukraine's got to come to us, like their father, for looking for an allowance every week, like, we are even more culpable than they are.
right. Well, you know, it's been my long-standing opinion that had we not funded, you know, anything to Ukraine, frankly, but even if it was just as it was originally designed, which was aid to the innocent people, um, the war would be over. We're propping Ukraine up. Now they're using US missiles. They're using NATO tanks and things like that, equipment. And then, you know, we're up to almost $200 billion in aid to Ukraine, where, you know, if they didn't have that, the war would be over. You know, I don't, and that's the thing. People on the left like to say that, have the expectation that, or the Democrats like to have the expectation that if this war, the only outcome to this war can be that Vladimir Putin backs completely out of Ukraine and gives every single bit of land taken back. And I just don't think that's realistic. It's going to have to involve, because it started by telling NATO years ago that I don't want NATO all up on my borders. Just like the US wouldn't want China to take over Mexico and Canada and start putting, you know, bases and whatever all up on our borders. we wouldn't be happy with that. And so,
Right.
uh, NATO started pushing up on Russia, and then Russia's like, all right, well, we're backed into the corner. We got to act, much like how I was framing it earlier. And Russia's not going to give anything back. And so, it's going to require NATO to back up off some borders, I believe. And maybe he'll give some land back, but I just don't think so. I mean, we're talking hundreds of thousands of deaths already involved. And what do you think the Russian people are going to do as far as support for Putin if he just backed out completely? And
Yep.
I also at the same time, I don't think Donald Trump's just going to be like it. Once he gets to power, is going to come in and say, "All right, time to give everything back to Ukraine," or the opposite. Even Russia gets to keep everything, because then they'll spin it as Putin defeated Donald Trump somehow. You know what I mean? Donald Trump bowed to Putin. So it just basically kind of just needs to be halted right where it is. And if we weren't continually funding the war, it would be over and it would be on Russians' terms. But conquering still happens today. I'm sorry to say it. And we didn't think, or for a long time I didn't think that it still happened, but it does. And Ukraine can't defend themselves on their own, or at least with minimal help from us and NATO. Then
Yeah. Well, and I don't think this article even if it has it in here or not.
Bricks
But
equals
one thing that
Axis.
was
You play Command and Conquer, I see, right? Sean.
yeah, I did. I'm actually on the opposite side. I think the way that we operate as NATO is Axis, but I'll get into that here in a second. The one thing I do want to point to is these missiles, along with the ones from Great Britain and France. So Great Britain and France authorize Scalp and Storm Shadow missile strikes, as well as when we authorize long range missiles. But it requires U.S. and NATO military personnel to actually direct these strikes. So, like the Ukraine military personnel can't do that. So I don't think there's any walking back what we're doing right now. Like we are actively attacking Russia.
Yeah,
I think
we're
with
in
that being
command.
said, yeah, not only we're in command, we're funding a lot of this stuff too. I think with that being said, I think that Trump has to actually, once in power, um, either begin to entirely pull back all of the military funding we pay into NATO and begin to actually take control of it as being the primary dominant head of NATO. Get rid of this stupid council crap because we pay for the majority of the militaries who are also involved in NATO. Um, Otherwise, I don't see a part of being in this NATO alliance if they're going to continually do things that cause these conflicts, that orchestrate this kind of military conflict, that it just really it has no purpose, right? I mean,
Yeah,
the whole reason, and a lot of what gets obfuscated is the fact that we had an agreement, a joint agreement, with the fact that we would not put NATO allied countries on the border of Russia. And that all falls apart when Ukraine, which is the one of the biggest things sitting on Russia. I don't know. Most people they say that line like couldn't point it out on a map.
right,
Well, when you try to bring them into an alliance, well, now what is Russia supposed to do? Now, not only are you putting like a region in which they've had previous conflict before with, you're
right.
putting in a very well-known corrupt country too inside of NATO. I mean, Russia has to respond to act as if we, at, in the last, 10, 20 years, have any reason in saying we are the moral superior authority when we went into the Middle East and did what we did when there was no evidence of weapons of mass destruction. It's like, I'm sorry, it's like the Russian people view it not in any way like that. They view it as like the United States is an out of control power and the American people can barely do anything because they're at the whim of what the liberal world order wants to do, which is all what we see in general in public schools, which is what you see exemplified at the highest levels, right? And I think somebody were saying this here earlier, but to get rid of the a lot of what's infiltrated the conservative movement as well. Now we have a new thing that's taken over X, which is this drama between Nancy Mace and I can't remember what that other trans man's name is,
I
and that
don't even
dominates
think
the
I've
news
heard his
cycle.
name mentioned. I just know that this dude is going into Congress and wants to use the women's restrooms.
Yeah, but that's what the conservative party has like now. That's what we talk about now. We kind of bent the knee to this drama. I
Mm,
think some of these things should be well above us, right? Like, don't bend the knee to this stuff anymore. This goes back to even to like a
yeah,
branch off of the optics argument of like this stuff is so woke and so fake and dumb, It's like, how about if you guys just want to argue about that, leave politics, get women out of here. All they do is like Nancy Mace is one of those ones that really kind of just rubs me the wrong way. She went into like what is it, the Citadel? She went in right after a lawsuit was passed to make sure that it wasn't a male only institution, and now she wants to fight for women only spaces. A lot of things are in the mix there, but I guess the main argument here is the United States lost its ability to sit here and act as a moral superior authority on any kind of matter.
Yeah.
And so when we kind of want to inflict and be like, well, this country should do this and this country should do this, I default more to an isolationist standpoint and be like, why don't we pull out? We need to stop paying all this money into NATO. NATO essentially, we pay for the majority of these militaries there. We get nothing for it besides being involved in these foreign wars. We get to send our fathers and sons and brothers overseas to go fight and kill some people who don't look like us, who don't believe anything like us. And then what do we get in return for it? We look back home, and the return, the option we have is we have lesser men, we have feminine men, we have women who are in the roles of men, and the whole thing becomes this backwards order that shouldn't even be. We need to return back to our roots, regenerate what we need in here in America, and start making some more sense of things. We're way too far away from the Christian patriarchy we're designed to be.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, Parker, I have a friend. Parker wants out. Let me open the door. Give me 1 second. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're fine, brother. I could go on these rants for days, but the point stands. I'm somebody who's very, very I despise what America has become, and I don't think we are the good guys in any form. As much as we can sit here and be like, well, the Democrats have done it, they still did it under the banner of America. And so if you're expecting the rest of the country to sit there and be like, oh yeah, you lost an election, we forget everything now that Trump's back in power, it's like those things just don't happen. The people remember, oh, you bombed the living S out of us. I lost my son. You killed this person. You killed these nurses. You killed these innocents. It's like they can't, none of that really matters to them because like, oh, we like lost an election. And you can even say, did we lose the election? But I won't bring that up here.
Yeah.
It goes a lot deeper than that. And so, with us being the empire as it is, there's a lot that we have to answer for. And I think that the best option and exit would be to become back to being an isolationist and energy energy independent power, where we were that original track we were on in 2016 when Trump initially got into power. Return to that, pull out, and stop bombing every other country in existence, because we just don't, we're not those guys.
A nation building hasn't worked for us yet. You know what I mean? I see Sean Wilson said 100% we are the money and the muscle in NATO. We should call the shots, and that's true. And I'd just be more prone to I don't know if I should necessarily think that we should pull out of NATO, but I like Trump's original stance in his first war years, where it was like, yo, the rest of you countries need to start paying your fair portion. And, we are the world's piggy bank from a U.S. perspective. And, while we have open borders, while we have this corruptness in our leadership, while we have overspending and a lack of appreciation for our veterans, like I see here, JB said he deployed to Iraq and that we aren't the good guys anymore. Which thank you for your service, all you veterans in here. I know a lot of you guys are, and I appreciate you guys a lot. I actually,
thank you.
On my cross right there, that's a little green army man. It was given to me by my church a few months ago, actually, and I put it there, and it's to remind us that we're supposed to continually pray for the veterans and their families at home, active duty, and the folks at home that are retired and stuff like that, because we don't take care of you guys enough. And I have friends that live with being over in those conflicts and forced to be in a situation where a child made a break for a gun leaning up against the wall and had to make the decision. You know what I mean? That type of scenario. And these people live with this guilt and question a lot of things, why it even happened in the first place and stuff like that, for the rest of their lives. And so, I can't thank you guys enough. And then, they come home and the left goes and protests their funerals. I think that's kind of a little bit in the past, but it's something that we've faced when it was a big thing when my little brother, who He died at 19. He was in the military. He was a Marine. He died at home in a car wreck after his basic training or whatever, just a couple of days after he got out. And uh, I remember thinking like I might go crazy if these people show up to his funeral. You know what I mean? That type of stuff. And so,
Yeah. No,
um,
sorry to hear that, though, man.
yeah, that was. I can't believe it was in like 2008 or something when that happened. But um, time flies. But my point is that we don't we spend all this money and then we have all these things that are needs at home that we don't take care of, stuff like that. And so, if we have to cut back some funding to NATO so that we can give it to the veterans here, or we take care of our own borders and our own national defense, which nobody and none of our allies ever chips into our national defense. I mean, we're constantly
Right.
funding this country or that country so they can be safe, but when we're being invaded from the southern border like no other time in history, nobody's saying, "Hey, I got 5 on your wall," right? And so, uh,
Right. When's Ben Shapiro's favorite country? You're going to send us hurricane relief funds.
yeah, for real. When is Taiwan gonna help out with the Maui victims, the wildfire folks? You know what I mean, over in the Pacific. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm
That
tired of
might be
just
one of the most forgotten about, you know, what's the word? Disasters
yeah,
in recent years.
tragedy. Yeah, I see some comments coming in here. Sorry, I'm just reading through some of these chats here. Russia's our last true ally. Uh, they're the last
Yeah.
Christian Orthodox in the East that has not capitulated in their beliefs. Meanwhile, Conservatives Inc. is the U.S. trot out there, and yeah, tyranny, trainee, Blair, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
Um,
true. I mean, well, just a small point on that. Russia may be one of the only places that Jeff Younger, were he to actually retake his children, he'd have to flee the United States. There is no sanctuary state in the United States that prevents gender procedures. They would all extradite him back to California. So Russia and I believe Costa Rica would be like two of his only options he could go to that would not honor an extradition from the United States. And
mhm.
so when you think about it like that, as well as like earlier in the year when they offered sanctuary for people who wanted to escape liberalism in the United States, it really gives you perspective. It's just super unfortunate.
Yeah, yeah, it is. I see JB said he had good intentions during his service, but you have to remember and think about how the rest of the world sees what we did. And I do take that into consideration, and I believe, um, a lot of these kids, right? Kids at the time, um, grew up to become even more radical, but they actually had like a reason to hate us. It might be radical, might not, I don't know, but I feel like some of these folks over in the Middle East, they grew up and they turned into like the terrorists that we're facing now because, you know, our country was responsible, NATO was responsible for killing their older brothers, for killing their dads and uncles. And, even more worse stories if there was, abuse towards like the women and stuff like that, And so then these kids just have that hatred like sewn into their heart and their soul. Um, as a youngster, forced to face like the harshest realities, and then they grow up and it's like their end all be all goal to get us back however they can. I can understand how that mentality would go. I see Jamie said Westboro Baptist still protects the military, or still protests, not protects the military funerals. You just don't see it on the media. Um, yeah, they were actually, I think they're out of Wichita, Kansas, or not Wichita, Topeka, Kansas, which was only a couple hours from where I grew up. So that's why I was uh, really concerned that they were going to show up to my brother's thing. I see Sean Wilson put a cross up, and uh, I agree with that too. I believe our country needs a revival, and that's back to your last point there that we need to return to these particular type of values, and I think only a revival coming back to the Bible, um, looking to Jesus Christ, invoking Jesus, and keeping his teachings in our hearts, and also back into society, um, is pretty much the only hope that we could get back to that type of scenario.
I mean, yeah, well, what's crazy is, and what's unfortunate, I think, too,
Hey,
but I think
Cora, I
it's
didn't say hi
helpful.
when you came in, by the way, I don't think.
What's up, Corbin? Is the prevailing argument, even among libertarians as well. You'll see this amongst like the Dave Smiths of the world. You see even Tim Pool's now kind of taking this argument, this mantle here, which is we've seen what a country that operates purely on this kind of secular atheism functions
Mhm.
as. And I think most people have arrived at the conclusion, from the negative point of view, which is like, well, we should at least probably believe in something rather than nothing, because the people who believe in nothing are some of the worst human beings to walk this planet. And when they operate with no or little to no moral code, most people might agree to just simply something like simple as relativism. Well, if it's worse than that, I mean, we'll go with the lesser of those options. It's just a broken, dysfunctional country, and I would go probably even bit further than moral. I'm a very ardent Christian nationalist. I think most of my followers, people who follow me on my channels and my social medias, know that I'm someone who would much rather actually take a much more fascist approach to things and start implementing a lot more of the Christian foundations back into the areas in which we need them. Not to diverge from the conversation, but just to make the point that a country with no morals it really isn't even a nation or a country at all.
Yeah. Well, that video that we played last Wednesday, that last video that we wrapped up with Charlie Kirk explaining how we are founded in those Christian values, and it was like it's 5 or 6 minute video of him breaking it down in so many layers. I think about that all the time. I think it would be important for us to get back to. Make sure
Yeah.
you guys hit that like button, subscribe to the channels, all that stuff. You can find me on X at Warrol, WARROL, and then is it Atlas Thug over on X as
Yeah,
well?
Atlas Thugged on YouTube, but it's at Atlas_Thugged_ on X.
Okay, okay. I always look past all the underscores and stuff like that.
The only thing I wanted to add, because you brought up the when we watched Charlie Kirk talking about the mention of God in the Constitution. This is kind of a point I bring up to a lot of people, right? The separation of church and state, which was ruled upon and adjudicated based on a letter that was sent by Thomas Jefferson into, I believe it was to a church in Delaware. I mean, could you think how angry you would be if the Supreme Court made a ruling based on a letter that Joe Biden sent someone back home to Delaware? I mean, you would be outraged, right? You'd be like, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of. You're saying the precedent for this law is because Joe Biden wrote a group of people a letter in Delaware. So, to me, it might be the biggest myth that exists and is poorly taught in schools in the DOE, obviously for a moral end that's benefited the liberal order. And so I'm glad that people like Charlie Kirk can dismantle it as quickly and efficiently as he does.
Yeah, it's awesome. I need to watch that video every day till I have it memorized.
Right. Yeah.
I like this quote here from House Leotardo. He posted, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other," which was John Adams. And then
Yeah.
Sean, I see you here. "Don't get it twisted. Russia may be based in some things, but they have been maliciously interfering in our politics and academia for decades." Yeah, definitely since probably the 80s. I mean, the Cold War. Did it ever?
Yeah.
I know that was not necessarily Russia; it was the USSR, but it's the same thing.
Right. The communist, what would you call it? Communist, like 100-year plan. Right.
I see you have a question here. A play on
Oh
Ayn Rand.
yeah. Yeah. So the name actually comes from the very first book that opened my eyes into politics. It was one that my dad liked a lot. It's my first kind of non, you know, what's the word, like mythological or kind of teen fiction book I read outside of like Percy Jackson, Aragon, and things like that. And so when I picked it up, really couldn't put it down. I was somebody who would like to read a lot of books. And it put things into perspective of just how, I guess maybe particularly how wrong someone could be when they're trying to kind of maybe describe a dystopic future. Because I think there's a lot of things that Ayn Rand was pretty spot on with, but there's also a lot of things that she got wrong. But the same thing goes for like 1984, um, Brave New World. So I ended up falling into that kind of that realm. And through the perspective of those books, the world makes a lot more sense than reading other things or maybe even just reading the news. Because I think that there's not forces at work in which desire to control or consume you when you have an understanding on like the rest of human history, world history, and that's essentially all that it's been, it's conquest and domination. And everyone can kind of point at the fact that we've kind of left kinetic warfare. The nuclear arms kind of changed that entire thing. And so now we fight war with information, we fight war with psychology, subversion, a lot of things on those realms. I mean, pornography is a weapon of war. There's many examples of instances, even physical pamphlets being dropped on people that had nudes and imagery like that, compared to just the acceptance of it on a domestic level. And I think that's maybe the purview that people need to have, is opening their eyes to stuff like that. But it is a play on Ayn Rand. I don't agree with her on a lot of things, but I do agree with her on a lot of ways that she'd kind of viewed the particular kind of moral ends that the world was facing, especially with capitalism and so on.
Interesting. I figured it was from the book or whatever, because I've seen the title. I've never actually read the book, but I should probably see if I don't read. I mean, I can read, obviously. I think actually my reading skills have improved quite a bit just from reading these articles, making videos and stuff. But usually listen to books, and maybe I should try to see if I can get that one on one of the platforms that I use to read books. I've been checking out Patrick Bet-David's stuff lately.
It's a thick one. It's a thick book. It'll take
Yeah.
you some time.
Just try to listen to it in the car or the truck or whatever when I'm driving, maybe possibly something like that. I see
Oh, yeah.
Cora mentioned she's surprised at the Christian revivals coming up on the college campuses. I think God is winning. We need to do our part. I 100% agree with that. And those of you that know my channel, that watch my daily videos, I typically will kind of pit a righty versus a lefty, or I try to stay up on like the current news. And I sent one to my pastor, and I asked him how he could help me like implement more of like, a godly take on it. And he had a hard time with that. So I'm trying to focus a little bit more. They're just not, they're not conducive to my daily videos, unfortunately. But I am trying to do more with the live and try to at least, push for the revival and stuff like that here, which is why I love having the opportunity to go live and not just be limited to my daily videos. See, Sean said, excuse me, it's much worse than that. The idea of the separation of church and state is actually to keep the government out of the church, not the other way around. I totally agree with that as well.
Yeah. It was, especially if you go to the First Amendment, right? It was meant to be freedom of denomination. And, you could probably listen to people like Stephen Wolfe and a few others kind of, harp on this at much length. But it specifically more so came from the fact of why the language is so poor and vague. They never foresaw, a nation that would kind of leave its Christian roots to such a degree in which we would come to understand the freedom of religion to mean anything but freedom of denomination. They kind of looked at it as a way of like not wanting any one singular denomination to have reign over all, whether it's the Quakers or whether it would be Presbyterians, Anglicans. They didn't want any singular denomination to want to take hold. But what's crazy is like, people immediately kind of forget the fact that different states had their own state churches. It was more so just a federal precedent to avoid ensuring or enshrining one denomination in law. And that's why, YouTube may not appreciate a lot of these things and a lot of my opinions either, but they'd be rolling in their graves to think that we would hand the keys of the kingdom over to a Muslim or over to, any other kind of creed or ideology that wasn't Christian. Maybe they'd kind of bite their tongue whether it wasn't Protestant Christian, but they'd at least accept that. But to move even way outside those realms, it's like, no way. This is not what the Constitution in this country was designed for.
Yeah. So sorry, I was a little bit distracted. I was going to say that I don't think that they, to add to your point, I don't think they ever saw that removing like Christian teachings from school was ever even a possibility. We used to pray in school as part of like the curriculum essentially, and
Mhm.
it's just gone, so it's veered so far off. To your point,
No, exactly. But I haven't read 1 Second After, Jay. I'll have to check into that.
sorry, I've been
Looks
trying
like
to
some people are liking it.
adjust my camera here.
Oh, you're good.
Uh,
Now you look better.
yeah, I was looking like small, so I want to
No, looks good.
make some adjustments. Sorry. Sorry, y'all. Y'all get to
Maybe like zoom out
suffer
so we look the same.
suffer with me. I'm like down in it. Here, let me do this too. Drop it down a little bit. Fill up more of the screen.
No, looks good. You still have a better backdrop than me.
Yeah, I wish I could actually adjust it to where my camera was thinner, so you didn't see the thing, the curtain, or it's actually a shower curtain because it's thicker. I don't like the light coming through the window. It messes up with the shadowing of everything during the day.
No, same.
But yeah, you see this one right here? That's Glamdring from Lord of the Rings. People like to think that it's some sword to represent whatever, but that's the nerd in me. That's Gandalf's sword.
Interesting. Let me actually write
I
this
don't know if
down. I'll have a
I don't know if
chance.
you've ever actually noticed that being a
Yeah,
little.
I have. I forget what it's called though. The sword, but it's the one that Elrond goes and runs after they reforge it back to Aragorn.
No, this is Gandalf's sword. It's
Oh, that's
Glamdring.
Gandalf's sword.
It's Glamdring, or AKA the foe hammer.
The foe hammer. Yes.
Got a nerd out for a
Yes.
second.
Writing on Shadow Facts.
Yeah.
So he says the 1 second after is available for free on YouTube. I'm gonna write that down actually, so I don't forget about it.
Yeah.
Being an old man over here.
Yeah.
But you know, I didn't want to divert too far away from the World War III stuff. I did want to add one final thing that we didn't touch on yet. Which is before we move on. So the Trump team is obviously expected to the transition team is expected to announce a peace envoy here soon. Leading report earlier today reported that Putin would be open to ceasefire discussions with Ukraine if the negotiations were led by Trump. And so the advisors so far, and this is the plan that I read earlier, would be to push Kiev to agree to terms that would establish an 800-mile long demilitarized zone and allow Russia to keep the land it has seized, which amounts to roughly 20% of Ukraine. It's about a fifth of the country that's been taken and seized by Russia, and those are their terms. So really, it's more so, no, we're going to give nothing to Ukraine. They'll simply stop. And then furthermore, that Ukraine would agree to not pursue NATO membership for 20 years.
Okay. It's kind of like what you can correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that kind of what the Donbass region was already? It's kind of like this demilitarized zone or whatever that.
I'm not as familiar with the
Or is that just
Donbass region.
it's kind of, or is maybe that just the area that they've just basically been fighting back and forth over for the last decade or whatever.
Well, yeah, I think it's if somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that would be their only warm water seaport, and so that's why it was so vital for Russia to overtake. You know, Ukraine is often referred to as the harvest basket, or the basket of harvest of that area or of that country, and that's largely because a lot of the area in Ukraine is very, very good for things like farming. It's very plentiful, bountiful, and it has a wide range of produce and products that it can make, or rather produce, I should say,
I heard a
on
while
its
back
host
that
ground.
most of the world's fertilizer comes from there too.
Yeah, yeah, they produce a lot of good things. Or
Crimea
Crimea.
warm water port. Okay,
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
So anyways, let's continue with the next phase of this story. And then after this, let's get into the Jeff Younger situation a little bit. But I wanted to play this video from Tim Pool. We're gonna kind of skip around. I'm gonna play the intro and then we'll kind of play it's 20 minutes long, and some of you guys might have already seen it, but he's breaking down the most recent thing, which is kind of contrary to what you just said about, maybe peace being on the horizon, because uh, apparently 2 deep water internet wires, I mean, which I think are some pretty massive things, were just cut. And usually, well, he says it best, but I'll just delete in. Usually, the cutting of communications is a precursor to, war or whatever. So with World War III kind of in mind, we'll just go ahead and play this.
Yeah, and shout out Chris, who sent this in earlier, brought our attention to it as well.
Yeah.
Wanted to say, 'cause I don't think we mentioned it too. We have a Discord. The link is somewhere on our pages, whether it's in the description or not. So always feel free. Don't feel like you're spamming us out or anything either. If you think there's things we should look at and cover that'd be relevant, send it in there so we can get a look at it.
Yeah, definitely. It's in the description on my video. I don't know if you put it in your video, but in your live here. But the link to the Discord is down there. If you guys try it and it doesn't work, let me know and I'll try to. I thought I put a link in there that never expires, but Discord's kind of finicky when it comes to that type of stuff.
World War III, a very real prospect that we have feared for some time now,
It's echoing.
may be ramping up. Many news stories now suggesting
It's echoing. Okay, let me try this.
It's not even really echoing. It sounds like you're playing two videos at the same time.
Okay, give me 1 second.
You're fine. It worked fine. In the green room.
Yeah, that's weird. Let me try to actually refresh it first.
World War III.
Same?
Yeah. But it's like not even an echo. It sounds like they're literally 1 millisecond after each other. It sounds like they're playing at the same time. That's so weird.
Weird. Okay. Well,
I can try sending it real quick, actually. Let me just type this in. Russia.
You wish there, Michael said, I wish there was an abandoned bunker near me, or like 3. Yeah, which is what they're actually doing in Russia right now. They're putting up anti, I don't know what you call them, bunkers, I guess, but some of them are above ground. I think a lot of them are. They're putting them up in the middle of the cities, hold like 50, 60 people that will withstand nuclear fallout for up to 48 hours or something. So, I mean, that doesn't say you're anticipating, a nuclear attack or use of nuclear weapons. I don't know what does. So weird. I had to literally reset all of the. Let me see here.
I went ahead and upload it on my end if you can't get the sound to work.
Broadcast stream. Let me try this. Do I still sound okay?
Yeah, you sound fine.
Okay, this should fix it.
A very real prospect.
Perfect.
Okay. I jiggled a wire earlier before, like 2 minutes before the stream started. I'll just tell you guys a story real fast. My dog was sleeping at my feet and a wire, and the way that her head was pointing out the back of my desk, the wire was going like underneath her chin, but she wasn't touching it. And I just pictured her standing up and just walking straight and completely like unplugging something. So I went and, reeled the wire in so it wasn't going to be in front of her, and all the audio settings and just got completely out of whack. So it's crazy. Like, even StreamYard changed my audio input and everything. So that's just wild. I couldn't play the song at the beginning. Anything. Anyway.
I appreciate it, Jay. I got it written down. I'll probably listen to it here in a little bit, actually.
I wrote it down too.
Thank you.
Let's see here. Sorry. I saw Sean said, no, it's always been part of the Ukraine. During the SSR, Russia flooded it with
Ethnic Russians.
to slowly cause a flip in the culture in the country. After the fall of the USSR, it just stayed full ethnic Russians and remained that way. Okay. All right, so here we go. My bad. Technological differences. But this is really well said. I know my wife gets annoyed that I play Tim Pool stuff so much, but it just is what it is. He has these conversations on a daily basis, and he's good at what he does. And I know he's not everybody's favorite person, but this one's just informative. He's reading these articles, and his take is worth hearing.
World War III, a very real prospect that we have feared for some time now, may be ramping up. Many news stories now suggesting that we are on the precipice, with Russia building nuclear-resistant bomb shelters,
there we go,
lowering the threshold for a nuclear strike response directly in response to the United States allowing Ukraine long-range missile strikes in Russia. which reportedly has happened, and Russia said would be an act of war against them by the nation with these weapons. They're basically saying, we're at war with you, America. We've now got word that 2 deep-sea internet cables have been severed in the Baltic. Now, we had a call from one of our members last night to become a member over at timcast.com. This is it's actually something that I missed and something very important. The cutting of communications tends to be one of the first moves made in any escalation of war. So when I see Vladimir Putin saber rattling, saying, we'll use nukes, I go, yeah, there doesn't seem to be a line. Russia does not want to do this. China is now saying show restraint. But then we got word, it was brought up by one of our members, as I mentioned, that these deep sea cables were cut. European leaders are calling this sabotage. Yeah. One of the first moves to be made in a war is to sever communications to disrupt your enemy's ability to effectively organize and strike back. So I fear now someone may be gearing up for a legitimate World War III. As of right now, North Korea has already deployed troops. South Korea has already got involved and has been deploying machinery and military equipment and may actually deploy ground troops. It's shocking and it's worrying. But I think the building of nuclear bomb shelters should be something we consider. Over the past couple of years, there have been many prominent European leaders saying we are in World War III, and you become desensitized to it. So I hope we are wrong about this, and it's not as crazy as it appears to be.
Sorry, break in just real quick. Does it, to his point, just quickly, I had this thought today. We don't see, do you guys ever see any videos coming out of Ukraine of any of this war stuff like there was in the first, 6 months of it or anything like that anymore? I don't see it that often, or hardly ever at all. It's like you have to go and search for it. It's not on my X when I scroll. It's not on the front page of YouTube. It's weird, it's just become like part of everyday life that this is this war over here. It's never going to end type scenario. I don't know. I just found it interesting.
I follow a lot of dissident rights accounts on X, and so I occasionally still see some of the really harsh stuff because they're really super anti against it. And no joke, you said that, and it reminded me. It was like either yesterday or 2 days ago. It was probably one of the days I was in the hospital where I just couldn't sleep after my daughter was born. There was an image that was posted, and it was a literal snapshot of one of these kind of medium range ballistic missiles. And I mean, the thing is like a foot off the ground, and you can see it. It's spear diving. It's going to hit the road, and there's 10 guys just right there, and every single one of those guys is gone. But it was just a snapshot. I mean, how that camera got that picture, and they found it or took it or whatever. But I mean, it makes you think too. We're in the era of and this is kind of reminiscent too of what happened on the October 7th event, where we're gonna see the worst of the worst, moments after it happened, published everywhere online. And I don't think I think with X being how it is and a few other social media platforms, same thing with Rumble as well, House is saying Telegram too, where we're going to be seeing this faster than any other kind of group of people, at least in the domestic areas, we're witnessing these events. And so I think this will be the first period of time where kinetic warfare will be heavily, heavily influenced by the public opinion of those back home. And so I guess that's a kind of variable to think about how this may be shaped moving forward. People in the chat are also saying a false flag event too. I would imagine that. I think that's the go-to for many countries to get stuff like this to happen. But it is unfortunate, and World's probably seen a lot of these videos too, where there's plenty of drone videos that you see.
Yeah, some of those are really sad.
And they just chase a guy around. There's a couple good ones where the guy somehow fought it off. There's one where a guy ended up getting I can't remember what he ended up firing up into the air. But it was a last attempt, and he was able to get the drone down and escape in time. But some of these are just terrifying, chasing guys to no end. And then
I remember the one guy, he was running and he turned around and he prayed, like he was like, please. He's like pleading with the drone operator or the drone itself, like, I've run as far as I can, and please don't. And it just
Yeah.
relentlessly pursued him. And that's actually an image that'll probably never go out of my head.
Well, it's sad too because most people don't realize there's an Air Force base here in Dayton, Ohio, near where I'm from. And even during the Middle East, I think some of the later conflicts we got involved in with the Middle East, there was actually a high percentage of Air Force men who were committing suicide.
Mm,
And that was due to the fact that they were spending 12 hours in these drone operators and these original ones where it was like these big, huge machines you'd have to go into and actually kind of really manually control.
like a flight
Um,
simulator.
exactly. And they really couldn't live with themselves that they were killing people thousands and thousands of miles away. And then you would go home to your wife and kids. It was some kind of extremely kind of life altering kind of event they were going through.
Mhm.
And so I know a lot of like individual stories of men who ultimately self-deleted because of doing such things.
Dang, it's crazy. All right, let's play some more. He's gonna get into an ad here in a second. I'm gonna skip over.
But I think with Donald Trump's sweeping victory, statements made by Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine that if the U.S. funding is cut off, we lose the war. The speculation
Darn.
is that Joe Biden, who has now approved long-range missiles and anti-personnel mines, the speculation is that the deep state will escalate this war to a point in which Donald Trump will not be able to negotiate its end. Maybe the cutting of these deep sea cables is a false flag made to make it impossible to negotiate any kind of peace treaty. I don't know, probably not. But the speculation before the election was the machine state will create a war that Trump cannot stop. That way, even if he wins the presidency, they get their war. Now let's read this news about these nuclear-resistant bomb shelters. And honestly, I think more importantly, the severing of these sea cables, these underwater internet cables. This may be one of the most shocking components here. Before we get started, my friends, head over to preservegold.com/. Of course, we've done to save really ever do reads for these companies. And there may be a plan beyond. Yeah, Trump may win, but war may be coming. We can't predict what's going to happen. So regardless of what I think or what.
Not trying to give a free ad there. They want to get their ad read. They got to at least pay for it.
Shelter, whatever it is you do. The New York Post reports Russia has started mass producing mobile bomb shelters capable of withstanding nuclear weapons while ominously accusing Biden of risking a potential World War III. The KUBM shelters are designed to offer protection for up to 48 hours against radiation from a nuclear blast or natural disaster, Russia's Emergency Ministry Research Institute said. They house up to 54 people and can also protect against explosions and shrapnel from conventional weapons, as well as falling debris and buildings and dangerous chemicals and fires, according to the Institute. And they're putting them up in the middle of cities. Yeah, this is crazy, man.
Sorry, I just want to respond to JB there real quick. Maybe they are trying to land grab before Trump gets in and stops it. Just a thought. Yeah, I mean, that could be it. Or maybe it's just they're evil sons of bitches and they just want to kill as many people as possible before Trump gets in. I really don't know. It's just, your guess is as good as mine. You know what I mean? But maybe it's both. I just don't put anything past this leadership group anymore.
Not only this, but some of these Baltic countries have been issuing pamphlets warning people to stock up on food in the event of nuclear war. They say Russian officials did not share a reason for the heftier safety measures. However, the announcement comes mere days after Biden agreed to allow Ukraine to fire U.S. long-range missiles into Russia, ramping up concerns about a potential World War III. Ukraine appeared to take advantage Tuesday, firing six at least 70 miles across the border, obliterating a Russian weapons base, according to Kiev. The change comes after months of requests by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to allow Ukraine's military to use weapons to hit Russian military targets far from its border, and mere weeks before President Donald Trump takes office. Take a look at this image. The shelters being built right here. Look at this. So these are in urban areas. The idea being that if, I guess, the nuclear siren goes off, you run inside these shelters and hopefully survive the blast. These things are not always just above ground. It looks like they've got underground shelters as well. Perhaps these shelters that are being built will be placed underground. I could be wrong.
Tell you what, I wish one of them things were near me, but I got like I'm on the East Coast. I got like 5 military bases in this town, and I don't know. I think I might be vaporized before I even hear the alarms going off if this actually came to us. Just a month ago, I believe Russia had a nuclear armed sub, like 25 miles off the coast, and I was thinking about it in like direct line. And I'm like probably 30 miles away from this thing right here. Like, not a very comforting feeling, you know?
Right. I was hoping I'd get a knock at my door for Vault Tech.
Mhm.
It's just kind of sad too, because like we're gonna get some kind of pretty crappy shelters if it happens now. At least in a Fallout, they were a few years down the line, so they had some pretty nifty technology going on.
Right.
But I
Like I
agree with
said,
what Mike was saying. Yeah, I don't think these are going to be very protective. And maybe these are not really meant to even be nuclear ones. Maybe these are ones meant to protect against these long range missiles, because maybe it is a bit more of the saber rattling, and they won't go to using nuclear.
Right. I think it's more of like fallout protection, not like direct blast zone protection. And from what I heard, I think he's going to get into it. It's only a 48-hour period, so it might just be one of those things where it might be one of those things where you're like out of the zone, you go into it for the initial like period, and then that gives you 48 hours to like figure out your escape route, and you take a bunch of iodine in the interim or whatever. They say take an iodine. I'm not a doctor, but it helps prevent the body, something with the thyroid, whatever, and prevent the body from taking in nuclear whatever. But I don't know. Like I said, I'm not a doctor, so
Yeah, it does something that like it helps prevent the either the catalyzation or the digestion of the radiation or the
right.
uranium. So the iodine having it in your body at least like blocks a good bit of it.
Yeah. Cora said, I wouldn't be surrounded by 3 sides of water right now. Thankfully, yeah, I'm not at the tip of Florida. I'll just say that. That would be pretty scary.
Yeah.
And then Cora asked, does anyone read the Moscow Times? I don't. Jokingly,
read
I
RT
don't know
sometimes.
Russian, okay? No, but I'm sure there's English translations. I'm just being a jackass. No, I don't. I'd be curious why you asked that question though. Like maybe you read something in there, what'd you read in there or whatever. Because that is actually something I don't know. It could be a light to some information. And then Michael said, yeah, there's got to be some reason for it. Maybe they're placed in particular areas too, right? Probably placed in areas where a bunch of rich people live. Yeah, I figured it as an English core. I'm just teasing, but it's very interesting on their perspective. I guess that's true. Probably, just probably I would be so concerned with taking everything they say from a grain of salt. A lot of stuff coming out of the Middle East, or not the Middle East. Well, whatever. Ben Shapiro's favorite country and their enemy. It's written by Hamas. Some of the news and stories and stuff like that. So it gets so one-sided that I just don't know what I'd really trust. But it's still interesting to see what kind of information they're getting and things like that. Okay, Moscow Times is a Western publication. I was being a jerk. I'm just having fun. I'm not really trying
I was
to
gonna
be
say I
mean-hearted.
didn't ever heard of it.
Yeah,
I
I've
know
never
RT
heard of
is
it.
the one that they've shut down. They did like a little hold on it. I can't remember what time period that was. It's so much is blurring together since I've been doing this.
Thank
But
you,
RT
Cora.
is the one they put like a stay against, where like you couldn't even like you would like get blocked on Facebook for trying to share an article from RT, like the Russian Times.
Yeah, send me that link. That'd be great. Okay, let's get back to this video.
Tuesday, Russian President Vladimir Putin has
because he's not even really gotten into the wires yet.
approved a new official doctrine that lowered Russia's threshold for using nuclear weapons. Take a look at this. Again, this was brought up to us by a member last night. European officials cry sabotage after 2 internet cables are cut in the Baltic Sea. European officials are looking toward Russia after 2 submarine internet cables in the Baltic were suddenly disrupted in an apparent sabotage operation, just weeks after the United States warned that Moscow was likely to target critical undersea infrastructure. A cable between Lithuania and Sweden was cut on Sunday, according to Telia Lithuania, the telecommunications company that runs the link. Separately, the state-controlled Finnish telecoms company Cinia said one of its cables, which connects Finland to Germany, was disrupted on Monday. I don't know why they're saying disrupted. What does that mean? If it was cut, it was cut. The Swedish prosecution authority said Tuesday the country's National Unit Against International and Organized Crime has opened a preliminary investigation into suspected sabotage over the cut cables. Finland's National Bureau of Investigation also said it had launched an investigation. Well, the exact causes of the incidents are still being investigated. Germany's defense minister Boris Pistorius said he believed it was likely sabotage. Quote, "Nobody believes that these cables were accidentally severed. We have to know that, without knowing specifically who it came from, that it is a hybrid action. And we also have to assume that without knowing by whom yet, that this is sabotage." His comments came after the foreign ministers of Finland and Germany said in a joint statement on Monday evening that they were deeply concerned about the severed cable between their nations and raised the possibility of the incident being part of hybrid warfare. The fact that such an incident immediately raises suspicions of intentional sabotage speaks volumes about the volatility of our times. A thorough investigation is underway. Our European security is not only under threat from Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, but also from hybrid warfare by malicious actors. However, 2 U.S. officials familiar with an initial assessment told CNN Tuesday that as of yet, there were no indications of nefarious activity nor intentional damage to seafloor infrastructure, and suggested the disruption was likely caused by an anchor dragged from a passing vehicle. I don't believe it for a second.
Yeah, I don't believe that.
I don't believe it was an anchor. You see, the reason they downplay these things, some might say, no. If it was Russia, they're gonna.
But didn't they say it was 2 wires? Like the anchor just ironically got 2 wires at the same time. I don't believe that. But I got that.
I'm curious if it's like separate. I'm curious if like there's the ones that were cut, and then the one that was disrupted that they said, they didn't say was cut, was the one that was caused by the anchor getting dragged.
Fair enough.
And they weren't like correlated.
Yeah, fair enough. Ironic timing, but I got that link here that Cora sent me on Discord, and I'll just say the top story on it right now is Putin rules out freezing war in Ukraine, top spokesman says. Okay. Russia's new nuclear doctrine takes advantage of ambiguity. Yeah, I'm going to have to check that out. That's interesting.
Yeah, I believe the new doctrine they passed is one that lowers... essentially just makes it easier for them to use nukes in regards to their own processes.
Yeah,
So
they lightened the
winding it down.
requirements, I believe, but just the headline underneath it says Moscow has made over 200 references to its nuclear capabilities since the start of the war and is continuing its saber rattling. Okay, so I mean, to write them off as just they haven't used them yet, they're never going to use them, I think is a pompous way of thinking about it, of approaching it, and I hope people recognize that.
Well, what happens when China says, you know what, we're sending 30,000 troops over to Russia and we're sending them over here? I mean, what happens then, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, referring to the BRICS nation allies, I mean, it's not a far-fetched reach to see that happening at some point down in the future. Hopefully it doesn't happen in the next 2 months. I think we're literally 2 months away. Today's the 20th. I think inauguration is January 20th. Help me out in chat if you guys know when inauguration day is. But I know it was on the 20th. Is it okay? So we're literally 2 months from it. So
yeah, the slate of electors is confirmed by the VP on the 6th, and then the inauguration's on the 20th.
Okay. Yeah. Pretty crazy. So let's watch a little bit more here. I don't want to get too focused on this, I guess, for just playing Tim Pool's video. I like adding our takes and stuff as well. But so far, I appreciate all the information that he's provided.
I'm going to play it up and say it was Russia. No, the U.S. wants to control when the public believes there should be a war. And if the U.S. does not want the war to start now, they'll give you some story. There's no reason to believe that what they're telling us right now is correct. We don't know. Take a look at this. There are 2 cables, internet cables in the Baltic. There are many other cables underwater. Why would we assume that only these 2 are disrupted when there are many, many more? That does not seem to me, and maybe I'm wrong, doesn't seem to me like that was just an accident, because this ship likely would have caused damage to many of these other cables unless they crossed right over here and dragged between these 2. I don't know. But I do know this. I did a quick Google search because, as I mentioned, when our member called in and they said, it seems like the attack on communications is the precursor to war. Could this signal that we are about to enter a massive conflict in Eastern Europe? Well, the fear that many of us have is that they're going to start a war that Trump can't negotiate out of. Now, this is just a Quora post. I'm not saying it's factually true or anything. It's something to consider. It's from 8.
I'm sorry, that made me laugh. Y'all see that South Park back in the day where they do the duck and cover and the volcanoes erupted and they all just get hit by lava and the duck and cover doesn't do anything for them? It's funny.
Good old South Park.
Oh, man.
Years ago, is the first rule of war to prevent their communications, was the question. A man by the name of Christopher Whitman, so he claims, is an ex-U.S. Army Reserve veteran of 10 years with an associate's in military history. He has he has 3,900 answers and 21.5 million views. This doesn't mean he's correct, could be totally wrong, but I think it's interesting. Here's what he said 10 years ago, nearly 10 years ago. Yeah, you could say that in layman's terms. One of the basic fundamentals of any military operation is the ability of your forces to communicate as well as your unit's ability to limit the communications of your enemy. If your enemy can't communicate fluidly, then they are severely limited in how they can react to whatever you throw at them. That's why, if you recall, prior to most major military operations like Desert Storm or Operation Enduring, what is it? Not Enduring Freedom. It's OIF. What was the other one? I can't remember what it stands for. During the first 48 hours when the Pentagon gave their briefings on the operations, they'd repeatedly comment on hitting Iraqi command and control assets. That's not just leaders. That's radio and relay stations, cell towers, military communications, hubs, and the sort. The deadliest weapon that one soldier can carry in the battlefield isn't a gun, not an RPG, not even a missile. It's a radio. Many of you may be, let me get the right name of this. It's not Enduring Freedom. It's so it's Operation Enduring Freedom is OEF, and the second one, and Operation Iraqi Freedom. Okay, there you go. Anyway, many of you may be fans of Dr. Stone. You guys ever watch Dr. Stone? It's a fun show. It's magic.
Okay, so he goes off talking about some anime stuff there. Let's skip forward to see if he, let's see. I see we got some folks over on X. Make sure you guys retweet this video. Help us spread it out as far as possible if you guys don't mind. Repost, retweets the old guard. My bad, my bad. I'm a noob.
Same diff.
Russia, NATO countries, afraid, issued pamphlets to their citizens advising them on how to prepare for World War III. China's telling everyone to chill out. And this is a major factor here. If China enters the fray in any meaningful capacity, then it's World War III.
Does anybody else find it kind of crazy that China's like the only level-headed country when it comes to this conflict right now? It seems like, I mean, I don't know if they really are, but if they're telling people to chill out and kind of staying out of it, where this is obviously Russia's like probably main focus. It's like, dang, they're actually practicing some restraint and patience and whatever, you know. Maybe they're actually being wise and recognizing that the escalate that they're almost being like dared to enter so that they can make this war even bigger. I don't know.
I think it's difference of priorities. I
Yeah,
think that a lot of what we hear about China is a bit overblown in terms of their capacities. I think for them it's probably one of two things. I think primarily it probably is that it's not the right timing for them. And
yeah,
so they prefer to actually build up a little bit more and be in a bit more secure position. And secondly, I think their priority is retaking Taiwan, not having to divert from their primary priority just to assist Russia. And so it's their kind of means of being like, sit back and wait. Let's find a better way to do this.
yeah,
Um, but who knows, right? I think, Tim nailed it there. I think any kind of meaningful capacity of China entering things, the whole dynamic changes. And this goes to,
yeah,
now you'll have two of the world's biggest three superpowers is now involved in this. The US will have to answer to. And I think it won't even be a matter of like, we'll have to answer. It'll be the rest of the world is simply waiting for the US. They'll be calling for the US to get involved. They'll be
like
saying,
boots
hey,
on
we
the
can't
ground
take on
involved.
China without, yeah. How are we going to defend against China? We need the US. And
Yeah,
then you'll get everybody kind of pandering towards that idea as well.
right. And maybe counter to your point there, because you'd think if China just helps Russia just win this, like comes in like, all right, we're sending 30,000 troops, we're sending 50,000 troops, whatever. We're gonna send 100,000 troops over there. We're gonna give you the full access to our uh our artillery, our jets, our whatever. Just basically we're gonna completely support you, give you whatever you need so that you can just end this. You know what I mean? You can put it on lockdown and keep whatever area that you want, and nobody will even test. Um, but then once everything that you have Russia is secured, you're gonna come help us take Taiwan. You know what I mean? Like it could be we're gonna wrap this up within a year. We're gonna wrap this up within two months, and then once you're secure, you got all your border walls built. Whatever it is. Now it's gonna be China and Russia taking over Taiwan. Boom, bam. I scratch your back, you scratch my back, and we just got your part of Ukraine and my part of Taiwan back or whatever. It's like
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I
One of those
think
things.
House Leotardo brings up a great point with more likely to intervene over Iran. And I think this is
Oh
a
yeah.
lot of the reason why we need to actually do our due diligence with all of regards to the Iran, being behind the assassination attempts of Donald Trump. I myself and many others, including people like Scott Adams, like I just don't believe that in the slightest. I don't think it's in any ounce in Iran's best. What's the word? For what reason, really, would they have to do something to that level? Especially because of knowing just like how war ready we would be to go against Iran, particularly in the frame of we would be aiding Ben Shapiro's favorite country, right? Like we don't need any more kind of sentiment to aid in that kind of thing. So especially when you look at it from the purview of Trump being someone who would probably put a whether it be a ceasefire or just outright peace overall, being the more option, I think Iran would prefer something along those lines rather than have the entire, Judeo-Christian military-industrial complex weighing down on them, especially with the ire of something such as Donald Trump being assassinated.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So we're getting down to our last 18 minutes or so of the show. I want to try to wrap up as close to 8 as we can. So let's go ahead, and if you don't mind taking the lead, I wanted to get into that Jeff Younger story a little bit. We're gonna change gears a little bit, and I know you know
Yes,
a little
sir.
bit more about this than I do. So if you want to go ahead and stage that, I'll add it.
Yeah. Yeah, let me go ahead and actually just bring this one up here.
I'll read some
We can start
comments
with
here.
this one.
Okay, and I'll read this comment real fast. JB said, "We, the people, don't want war. We are happy to live our lives. People around the world feel the same way. It's the powerful people doing this. They will never stop seeking power and control." 100% JB. And, that lends credit to Trump's uh, big statement before the election where he was talking about Liz Cheney, the last ditch ever from the mainstream media trying to make Trump look like this bad guy that wants to get rid of his political opponents when really he was just saying, nobody wants this. And so instead of you guys being elite, protecting your kids, protecting yourselves, uh, voting for the rest of us to go to war, the rest of our children to go to war, why don't you go do it yourself?
So
But yeah, go
I
ahead.
guess
You take the lead on this here, and we're gonna move over to Jeff Younger. Go ahead and let her rip.
yeah, I mean, we're changing gears pretty heavily here, and this goes back to focusing on domestic issues, and this is going to explore a few different ideas that surrounds the entire sphere of transgenderism. It actually delves into things such as states' rights and when the federal government should step in, and it touches on a lot. I mean, not a few, a lot of things. And I think because his case and all of these rulings have essentially come to a close, and on screen here is one of his tweets that went viral. That even one of the replies that I had, got a bunch of likes. My phone's blowing up nonstop.
Make his
And
awesome.
so I appreciate that. And so this from Jeff Younger's show. We need somebody who's gained a lot of following over this last bit of time period because of what's been going on with his son. It's one of these things that following these developments and the unwillingness of the conservative media space to actually cover it in its entirety and in the consequences of such a thing happening has kind of really pushed me away from the traditional conservatives with a few other things. But it kind of goes beyond the just get married rhetoric you hear from a lot of the traditional conservative pundits like the Matt Walshes of the world and a few others. Not to say that it's the only reason why I wouldn't like them, but Jeff Younger, I mean, just to make a long story short, this is a man who, amid divorce proceedings as well as a custody battle, has now essentially lost every single right he has to his two boys that he had via IVF with a woman we'll just go by the last name Gorgolis. I think that's how you pronounce her last name.
Gargles.
So long story short, yeah, Gregolis or Georgolis or something like that. I've heard it pronounced both ways, so forgive me, especially for someone who's followed this. Just she's just an evil person.
I was
We'll leave it
making
at
fun
that
of it.
too. But yeah, I guess the best way to embark on this journey is the fact that he's been in court since 2018, adjudicating different things. This has went from Texas to now California, in large part because after a specific ruling that was given down by the Texas Supreme Court, his wife fled to California with her two boys. Now, the reason why she fled to California was because she wanted to trans one of the sons, not both of them, one in particular. Now, this has led a lot of different things to go on. Jeff has literally exhausted every single option he has in the courts. He's went appeal after appeal to district court, to this court, to moving to California to fight it on those grounds, only to have finally essentially lost almost every single one of his parental rights. And now, as you can read here, this tweet, I lost all parental rights to my sons. Goodbye, boys. Perhaps we will meet when you are adults. California Judge Juhas gave my ex-wife authority to castrate my son, James. All contact with my boys must be supervised. I won't do that. I send letters and gifts to my sons. My ex is not required to give them to the boys. I cannot post pictures of my sons. Let my story be a cautionary one for young men. Fathers have no rights to their children. Do not enter the family law system. Now, he has been on a different kind of battlefronts, particularly a lot of them regarding family court and just how biased family court is in a multitude of ways, largely just the fact that men just outright lose a lot of the times. He pointed out a lot of things that were news to me, which maybe you don't even realize. But one of them in particular is the fact that most treasuries and most judges actually make money on how much child support they assign. In particular, in Texas, the Treasury is assigned, I think it's 44 cents to the Treasury per dollar assigned in child support. And that actually goes back into the coffers of the judges as well. Some of it's actually funneled into their pension funds and things and retirement things like that. So it's a very corrupt system. The mother does have serious mental problems. I believe this is likened to the trans mansion house syndrome, which is essentially to use these kids as a trans token in the form of receiving all the benefits that come with that, just from the virtue signal that it is, as well as the social clout that you can get from that in the current political system. And all in all, this has resulted in the fact that where he is now, he has no access to know like what kind of medical care the kids are receiving. He has to go through her for that. Um, and the larger story really being in this is the fact that he got a 50-50 ruling in Texas. And once he received that, the mother saw that California was on the eve of passing a bill that effectively makes them a sanctuary state for these kind of gender affirming procedures and care. So she fled to California in hopes that Texas wouldn't extradite. And that's exactly what happened. Texas actually chose not to extradite, um, largely in part because not even because California was a sanctuary state for these kinds of things, but largely because they viewed it as setting a poor precedent for future cases, largely just signifying that they didn't want to do their jobs and give a just ruling, and that the judges kind of what's the right word for this? They kind of abdicated their responsibility, I think, for what would have been good and just here. So all in all, one of the big takeaways from this court case, and where it's rather unfortunate, I mean, it's actually good that it's reaching a bit more national news. And I'll give my thanks to a large account, Sovereign Bra. He actually reposted one of my tweets regarding this matter because I argued, puberty is a human right. I think it actually goes beyond a human right. I think denying a child of what is natural and becoming to them is actually one of the most grotesque forms of debasement. And I think it's quite evil. But the point stands here is that we are in the time period in which America effectively has sanctuary states for children to be experimented upon and debased, but we don't have sanctuary states for the opposite. Now, there is a recent space that involved Jeff Younger as well as a new senator. I believe his name is Derek Evans. He's a senator of West Virginia. Now, he has vowed actually to immediately begin pushing through a bill that would make West Virginia a sanctuary state for the opposite. In the case of Jeff Younger goes and retakes his sons and flees to West Virginia, they will prevent extradition to California. Now, this comes in the purview essentially of how the breakdown kind of occurred regarding the Civil War and the states' rights issues and slavery. My stance personally is I think it's and I echo Jeff Younger with this, which I think that this is actually even a more morally obvious question than slavery. And I think if you have to struggle to understand what's right in these scenarios, you probably need to pick up a Bible and spend some time at a church. There needs to be a federal ban across the board on these kinds of procedures, the hormonal care, the therapy, all of it. It needs banned completely on a federal level, because effectively what we will get is we are going to get different states that you can run to and avoid this, and different states you can run to hide from the consequences of it. And it's sad. I think this is going to open up a different kind of violence. One particular where and you will even see this in the comments too. A lot of things I can't even say on YouTube. People will call it Fed posting and such and things of that nature. But men essentially saying, he's exhausted every option he had in courts. I think every God loving man knows what the right answer is to do now. And obviously that infers something to go outside of the legal means. And, I can't say I disagree. I think, the only way I could see a disagreement
Me
there
neither.
would be a win in the short term. If, he eventually does get caught or pulled over, then the kids go right back to mom, and then he does some kind of long-term sentence there. It's like, then what happens then? Right?
Right.
Would you really be able to get your kids back from that scenario? It's a heartbreaking situation. It's one that it makes you think, as for as long as he's fought this and as many shows and podcasts he's been on. This is a man who's been on Timcast and even argued his point in what the situation he's been in. How has this not been picked up and fought harder, especially by people like, like the Daily Wire or Dan Bongino or some of these larger shows? Because this is kind of a branch off point and kind of the worst example of what can happen when you get a bad family court ruling. But I think in particular, family court is one thing that the Red Pill group and the Manosphere gets right when they talk about just how busted it is when it comes to men's rights in those facilities, and just how poor of a chance you have as a father of retaining your rights. Now, if just as you look at the DOJ and the rest of how America operates, corruption is rampant through these parts. And, the argument's as simple as this, it's easier to pull money and make a money cash cow out of a loving father than it is a meth addict.
Hmm.
So when you're forced with who do I want to assign child support from and ensure that this person gets custody, well, you essentially have a winner loser complex there, and the winner
Yeah.
becomes the mother, and you pull the cash from the father, who's going to do everything in his power to fight against it. So there's all of these poor and misaligned incentives that have allowed for a situation like this.
Well, I can
But
speak
the
to
one,
that from
go ahead.
experience. I was just gonna say I can speak to that from experience. Maybe some of you guys who know me a little bit closer from the Discord and stuff like that. Uh, I was a teenage dad. I became a dad when I was just barely, well, I guess I was 17, right? And I was married and divorced before I turned 18. And uh this is to tell you my story. I'm not reflecting on the mother or blaming the mother. But the government made it to where she was in a position where she would be better off divorcing me and being able to claim single mother status on her taxes so that she could get $4,000 or $5,000. Whereas I was I got completely screwed in this situation. I was working 2 jobs. I was framing houses in the day, in the morning to the afternoon, and then I was loading trailers at UPS in the evening. I did that for the majority of our marriage, and the first couple, my daughter was born in November, which is actually in 3 days, her birthday. I gotta remember that. Um, and it only lasted a couple months because the government made it to where it was more appealing for the mother to divorce me and claim the single mother, which screwed me because I was working 2 jobs based on having a wife and a daughter dependent. So I ended up getting slapped with an IRS bill when I was 17. And then we proceeded to have and this is just to your point where the court doesn't prioritize fathers. And I saw JB said his divorce was terrible. He got treated like a criminal, perfect record, and a disabled vet, and it didn't matter. I was the same way. I was not a vet or a disabled vet, but I had a perfect record, all this type of stuff. And we had worked it out where I was going to essentially pay for daycare, that type of thing, for my kid rather than go through the court system. And suddenly, once that all caught up to me, I had this huge arrearage that I owed on child support that I was then obligated to pay. So I showed up to court. I had a stack of receipts that added up to nearly the amount, not the full amount. But the judge looked at me, and it was a woman judge, and she had a little side person there, and they both treated me like I was this absentee. They made me feel so bad. And I had this stack of receipts that was showing that I was paying for stuff, you know, everything. She's like, "That's a gift." They laughed at me and said, "You have to pay every cent through the court system." And it's to your point that these judges get these kickbacks, and I didn't even know that part. And so it's like, it's crazy. I my whole life was revolved around taking care of these 2 and myself hardly. I mean, hardly myself, but taking care of these 2. And, I just basically got thrown to the wolves of the court system. And by then, I had already moved on. So then that put burden on my current marriage. You know what I mean? And so it's like, all right, now I got this debt that we have to pay, that we have to factor into our budget. And it's not like I was trying to duck paying child support or anything like that. I was just paying the daycare directly. I was picking her up multiple days a week. I was paying them whenever I did it. You know what I'm saying? That type of scenario. But the courts didn't care. And it's just a testament to how uh callous and cold-hearted these court systems are when it comes to fathers and fathers' rights. And it even goes a step further when it comes to like abortion. The dad never has a choice in that. And
Right.
it takes two to tango, but it only takes one and a judge to make it the other way around, or one and a doctor, and it's just, I don't know, the dads just don't have any rights to anything. We're just basically uh at the court's mercy, at the mother's mercy, when it comes to this type of stuff. So I just wanted to share
Yeah.
that little bit. Um, Not trying to make anybody look bad in my past. That everybody's grown up and changed. We were all young and kids basically when it happened and everything. So I just wanted to share that because it is a testament to how the court system prioritizes the mothers over the fathers like 100% of the time. I don't think I've ever heard a story go the opposite way. And, that even goes further into our society and our culture. Particularly with I think that affects black folks quite a bit, with the fatherless, homes and stuff like that. There's an incentivization, um, from the courts, from the government, from the IRS to for these moms to chase money and not have the dad around, or not at least be married to the dad. That's just anti-marriage. It's anti-God. It's anti-human, in my opinion.
No, I didn't know that actually, but it echoes largely a lot of the reasons why I even got into politics to begin with, because I entered politics on the basis of there is a gender war currently, and I always kind of viewed it from the framework of, you can always kind of bring up issues that men go through, and the instant kind of rebuttal you get is, but women though. And to think that there could never be a situation in which there is an imbalance where perhaps women are perpetuating 60 to 65% of the problem and men are 30 to 40%. It's like it always for some reason has to be 50-50, and that's the only way you can look at it, because men and women are equal. And I think that takes away a lot of the culpability on the fact that there has been a lot of things done to exploit um, men and women for their biological predispositions. And what's insane too is when you look at the data, nothing at all, literally no, there's literally not a single aspect or facet of data that will support the fact that a single motherhood home is even better than a single father home. And so that even breaks into the point of how could there even be such a bias if we have so much data that points to the opposite? Even if we wanted to be a logistically based court, then you would think that the bias would swing in the father's favor. When you look at things like single motherhood homes are the ones that are most likely to go to jail, most likely to commit an assault, most likely to commit, the list goes so on and so forth, not even go to college, all these different things. A
Yeah.
lot of things can get kind of taken away from this case. But a big part of it is because I was someone who kind of grew tired, and I'm married, and I'm someone who's married myself. So I say this with a perspective that looks in on everything. I got really irritated from the just get married rhetoric that comes from the right. It's kind of a I don't want to I don't want to dive into that because it's such a losing issue. It's because it's one that you actually have to take a kind of confrontational stance against women and how current
Sorry,
women
that was loud.
operate. No, you're fine. I think it speaks to the fact that there's a lot of conservative women who don't understand that they're feminist, and that's such a deep fight that needs to be taken on a basis that you have to be so well argued and so well mannered and so distilled and articulate. Otherwise, you get eaten alive in these arguments. That's why, somebody like Andrew Wilson is someone I follow a lot. And I think he does a really good job. He's been on Timcast here
Yeah.
a good bit in the last few days. He argues very well, and that's specifically what he does, is kind of point these things out.
Yeah.
And I have the tweet here that provides a bit more context, but before I wanted to read this through and it'd be one of the last ones, was I just wanted to point out it's unfortunate. It does speak to how we've moved away from, patriarchy, which is God's design, that is the design of the natural order of things, and how far we've moved away from it. But largely, and it's probably the third time I've said this, it speaks to it's why is this such a left alone issue? Family courts, it's not like they were busted in the last 4 years. It's not like this is a Biden thing.
Mhm.
We've seen these Maury shows and the family court stuff that's been around since, I was like a young kid before I was even a teenager, just how
Yeah.
busted family court's been. Especially, Jay spoke earlier. What's insane about what Jay was saying was actually, if you look further into the data, military men are actually some of the worst benefitors of this, right? They actually bear a lot more of the consequences. If you look at a domestic family split up in custody arrangements versus a military man in a military family, military men have a much harder time retaining custody of their children, but are also the ones who are much more likely to actually have a wife involved in an affair, or have a child outside of wedlock due for someone else. And it kind of, you think about these things even logically, right? You get into these points where men do end up leaving the home. You know, they end up getting, it's all of the responsibility, none of the authority. And you have situations where you're told you have to pay, you know, upwards of, you know, sometimes even $1,000 a month, depending on what your financial arrangements are, to pay for a kid that's a lot of times might not even be yours, to a woman who you no longer have any sexual access to. The relationship has been busted. And so the whole thing is just kind of a drainage, on a spiritual and in a physical level. And, you know, and I'm glad Jay brought that up too, because Jeff Younger points a lot to this too. A lot of the questions he got regarding this custody arrangement was, were you taught close quarters combat in the military? Have you ever killed someone in the military? And they do these kind of tactics to kind of word things out as if being dangerous as a father, is not a good quality to have, rather more a negative one, because fathers can only exist in this purview of being abusers to children and not guardians or defenders, willing to do what's necessary.
Right.
Um,
It's like,
but
yeah,
I
I'm
would encourage
dangerous,
everybody.
but
Oh, go
my
ahead.
kids aren't at risk. I'm just saying, yeah, I'm a
Right.
dangerous mofo, but my kids aren't at risk. Mess with them and find out, you know?
Exactly. And that's the way it should be. You know, it should be. You should be, what's the word? It's better to be a warrior in the garden than a gardener in a war.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to finish off by saying I encourage everybody to look into the story. There is a petition, you can find on Jeff Younger's page on X. You can probably find it elsewhere. Just signing it to take this to the U.S. Supreme Court. Since it's failed and all the other options, that's actually the next step to can get escalated. But this is Connor Tomlinson here, who actually posted this. He's someone he's, you know, as it says here, reactionary Catholic zoomer. But you can find more on a lot of these other senators' pages who have taken this issue up in the last couple of days. But he writes here, his friend Jeff Younger has had his sons stolen from him by his ex-wife in the California legal system. Anne Gorgolis is obsessed with chemically castrating her son James to treat him like a girl. Jeff can no longer prevent her from doing so. Jeff used IVF with Gorgolis and conceived James and Jude, twins, both of whom are only biologically related to Jeff. After 5 years of marriage, they divorced in 2019. A Dallas County judge annulled their marriage at his wife's request, making his children illegitimate and revoking his custody rights. His prenup was then thrown out retroactively. She and the school began to socially transition James in secret, but Jeff had video evidence of James acting as a healthy, happy boy of his own volition when visiting his father. Another judge, Mary Brown, then stripped him of all parental rights. The Texas Supreme Court upheld a ban which prevented Jeff from intervening in the transition process.
Shame on
His
them.
ex-wife then took the boys to California on the eve of it becoming a transgender sanctuary state. She filed it to have James chemically castrated to get around the Texas court order prohibiting it in 2021. And this is why I brought up the federal ban needs to be put in place, because otherwise we're going to end up getting a civil war like scenario surrounding refugee sanctuary states on
Gonna
this
have
issue.
homie and his policy roll up.
And right. And I even wrote, you know, in a just society that would be unspoken. You know, I think that would have already occurred at this point. But
Yes.
I also can hold Jeff in high regard for attempting to honor the system and exhausting every kind of legal option he had.
Yes.
And I don't think this goes on much more, but I'll just finish up by pointing out some of these more specific ones here,
Okay.
which is James does not have a treating physician. He was diagnosed by an LGBTQ alphabet soup social worker, Daniel Hurwitz, on April 23rd, 2024, through a gender assessment 2 months after Gorgolis filed the motion.
How does a
Now, it
social
does
worker
go on to bit. Oh, go
diagnose
ahead.
anything? I'm just asking a question. How does a social worker even have the authority to diagnose anything? Crazy. I mean, it's a
That's what you'll
rhetorical
find.
question, kind of.
Well, no, you'll find a lot of this. The more you go through this case, it's hard to find a good bit about this case. I believe Judge Juhas in California actually ordered some kind of special order on the case that prevents most of the records being public. One thing that's insane about this is the LA Superior Court claimed that they lost the case file in July of this year because of a ransomware attack after initially intentionally deleting the public record of the file on the 30th of May. This entire case is rife with corruption. It is filled with one-sided, asymmetrical political warfare, and they're doing it all at the cost and consequence of Jeff Younger, his soul, his son's futures,
His
and it
son
is
as
one of
well.
the most disgusting things I've ever seen. But
It
this is a
is.
picture of him and his son.
Dang. And that's just so crazy, dude. Like the Texas Supreme Court, you think, well, Texas will hold it down for him, and it's like, no, actually, they won't. When it comes to fathers being dads, no court anywhere gives two shits, and it's effing
Right.
disgusting, man. It's really, it's just crazy. I can't believe he
It's
was diagnosed by a social worker. Um, the fact that she had everything annulled and it just erases like all these social contracts that you basically have. It's just straight up scumbaggery. And
right.
I don't know how a person like that can be happy. How do you wake up and like look at yourself in the mirror and feel good about what you've done to your own child and to the person that you committed through sickness and health that you would be there for them, you know? It's like, oh, it was
Yeah.
annulled, so now I don't have to honor any of that shit. It's just like
I
good.
think we underestimate just how many sociopaths walk among us now. And one
Yeah,
thing that wasn't even in there too, his wife, his ex-wife, Gorgolas, is a pediatrician. And I did read at another article that Jeff had come to believe that she was using her pediatrician license, in fact, to get the gender hormones around without having to go through an actual doctor herself. In fact, she was signing off the paperwork for the hormone therapy herself to give directly to James. So there's no intermediary there. Essentially, a parent being like, "Yeah, I'm a doctor. I need hormones for my son." So there was no kind of checks and balances there, kind of like a
dang,
direct access there for the hormones.
that's
And it's
crazy.
just, yeah,
That's so crazy. I mean, you wish the best for this little kid, and I just hope that he grows up and hates his mom for this. I mean, there's it's seemingly becoming hopeless for anything else to root for in this case. You know what I mean? So all we can really, sorry if I've been kind of quiet, breaking out. I forgot my, I realized my mic was far away, but it's pretty much all we can hope for now is 10 years from now, this kid realizes what his mom did to him, stripped him of access to his own father, and at the same time made him unable to reproduce and have a family of his own. And I don't even feel
right.
like it's disrespecting this kid's pronouns or anything like that because I don't believe a person under 18 has the mental capacity to actually even make this type of decision for themselves. We know that the human brain continues to develop until 25, and I was a jackass little kid, you know what I mean? So
Yeah, same.
um I didn't I didn't want to play with dolls like or whatever, but I mean, just saying, I wasn't able to make this type of decision. Like if you would have asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, I might have told you uh, something complete opposite of what I would like to do today. You know what I
Right.
mean? Just as simple as that. Every kid in kindergarten wants to become a fireman or police officer or an army man or something like that. And
What I
nowadays
really
everybody
hope is
wants to
that,
be an influencer, but
right. Yeah, right. Look at us. I
right.
one thing I do really hope though is that West Virginia passes rather quickly to become a sanctuary state for children who have been victims of whether their parents or healthcare systems
Mhm.
to transition or gender affirming care, and that Jeff and a few other people go and do what's necessary and take them to West Virginia. I
Yeah.
really think that might be the only answer right now, because I can't see it with as slow as our system operates, a federal ban being
Well,
quick
it's a
enough
tit for
to
tat.
aid.
It's a tit for tat. If she abandoned she took him out of Texas, ran to California, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
at that point, it's just a game of, I don't know, cat and mouse or tit for tat or whatever you wanna call it, you know? It's
Yeah.
and that's the thing about it is she played her hand, hate to say well, but she was very thorough with everything. Had I mean, and forgive my language, but fuck that attorney. The lawyer that helped her get all that shit done. This
Right.
dude is a scumbag, or gal is a scumbag, worse than all of them almost. You know what I mean? Like, for money, you're
Yeah.
gonna do this, you know? um,
Well, even think about it. What if, it's Jeff and like a couple West Virginia state marshals show up in
yeah,
California at this lady's address,
yeah,
and then she's ready for it, and it's like it's her and California state marshals versus Jeff and West Virginia state marshals, right? It's like, what happens in that scenario? I mean, that's when it's like that's when it gets ugly fast.
right. And that's
Or,
one of those
they go to
scenarios
the
that we've been
border.
warned about. You know, it's like, how far does this go before this scenario that you present actually becomes a reality? I know I when I hear this story, I always think of the guy that you guys have probably seen this video. It's been around for a while. I think the story is probably 15 or 20 years old now, but there's the story of the dad who found out that, I can't remember if it was like the Boy Scout leader or the gym teacher or whoever the person was that had access to his son was molesting his son and killed him. I think he killed him. And the dad goes and he's standing there acting like he's on the payphone in the
Yep.
courthouse. And then they go walk the dude that did the thing past him, and nobody even knows the dad is standing there, turns around and does something that, you know, uh,
Yeah. Domes them.
yeah, drops the dude on the spot. And it's like everybody that was there realized how bad it was, but how justified it was all at the same time. And, I think of that story when I hear this story, and, I hope it doesn't get to that extent, but it's
Right.
it's a situation of what a dad would do, representative of what a dad would do to protect their child or their child's uh legacy,
Well,
innocence, that type of stuff.
I always thought that it was going to be abortion that would bring up this kind of states' right issue in the form of kind of why there needs to be federal precedent on it.
Yeah.
Because if say a husband
She
gets a
shouldn't be
wife
able to
pregnant.
dip out to the other state.
Yeah, but I mean, think about it. There were corporations that were paying for it. I mean, if you worked at certain like Fortune 500 companies, they would pay. If you have to travel out of state to get this because your state won't allow it, we'll pay for your travel expenses.
Yeah, that
And
should
then, like we said earlier, the man has no say in this. What if the husband's like, "You're not going,"
right. She had like
right?
a
And then you get a
GoFundMe or
situation.
something like that too, and just like, no, if there's a federal mandate, then you can't do all that crap and get the
Right.
financial support that it requires for you to just uproot and move to the other state. Oh man, what a
Also
terrible scenario,
saying
man.
Aaron Spencer is going through that right now. Let me also write that down. I'm unfamiliar with that case. I know they were in this big space, and Jeff was actually talking about how there's actually multiple other stories
Mhm.
with guys going through similar things. And I do expect it may be a growing phenomenon, just given the fact that the
That
majority of the
that the
conservative movement
mother
just
in this
doesn't.
situation has gotten away with so much, it emboldens the next person.
Yeah, and I mean, I also think
It
too,
paves a
this whole
way.
transgenderism stuff, we have to wait until they actually start the predation of children. Then, oh, now we'll do something. It's like, dude, we should have done something a long time ago. This
Right.
stuff is ridiculous.
Yeah. It
But
doesn't
thank you,
it doesn't
House.
take a rocket scientist to realize what it leads to when they're doing so much up front.
He shot a PDF who kidnapped his daughter.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay. Sean, appreciate you being here, man. God bless you too. Hopefully we see you in the next one for sure. Appreciate you being here and adding to the conversation. And if you're not in the
Yeah.
Discord, if you got Discord, maybe click that link and join the family over there.
Yeah. Direct access to both me and World. You can hit us up anytime through there.
Yeah.
But I think that's really all I had for the Jeff Younger case. Anything really more I want to say, YouTube has banned World's channel for it. So
Right, right. Fair enough. That makes sense to me. I see some folks actually coming into the Rumble. Appreciate everybody for watching over there on Rumble as well. Make sure you I haven't posted videos for a while over there, but I'm going to get back to posting videos, and we're going to start doing the stream every Wednesday and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern time. That'll be going up on Rumble, YouTube, and X as well. So, let's see. I guess that's pretty much it, man. We ran 18 minutes past the 8 o'clock deadline, which we got more to talk about, but I know people want to go watch the more popular show that starts at 8. And this has been a pretty good conversation. So I think we'll just go ahead and call it there. And so anyways, what did Jay say? Maybe it's all because a split up family is easy to control. Tinfoil. No, I don't think that's tinfoil hat at all, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think that's Bobcat, that's funny. He just got here. That's what happens to me every time Chris goes live. Chris Stockham here in chat, he goes live himself, and I always jump in literally and say, "What's up, y'all?" As he's wrapping up. It happens to me all the time.
Yeah.
So appreciate
Roll
you
credits.
for checking it out there, Bobcat. We'll see you in the Discord and stuff like that too as well. But that's pretty much all we got for the show this evening. And then we'll be back Saturday at 6 o'clock. We did move the time up to 6 o'clock for both days. Just so it's consistent. When I advertise on my daily videos, I feel weird saying 6 o'clock on Wednesdays, 8 o'clock on Saturdays. I don't know. It's easy to say, but it's just easier for people to remember if it's 6 o'clock for both shows. So anyways, appreciate everybody for being here. It's good to see you there, Bobcat. I'm glad you did stop in and at least catch the end. Let's see.
Thank
What
you
did
very
Michael
much,
say
Cora.
there? We need to get people's spirits healthy. I like this. We need to get people's spirits healthy to get them to see right and allow the states to vote it. Yeah. I don't know. I do actually think the federal mandate might actually be best in this situation. Gonna hit the simulated racing. That's cool. All right. Yeah, drop the like, all that good stuff, you guys. I'm Tyler. Go by Worrell sometimes. That's why you'll find me over on X as Worrell. And let people know once again where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me on YouTube at Atlas Thugged. I guess I'm on screen right here too. You can also find me at Atlas_Thugged_ as well on X. Here as of late, I'm a bit more active on that's what my profile picture looks like. But you can find me more active on
I don't see
on
it
X.
actually on there.
Oh, it's underneath the comment, I think. I'll just
Oh.
click here.
There we go. Click on your account.
Yeah.
There you go.
__. That's how you can find me. Gained a good bit of followers too. Once again, shout out to Sovereign Bra if he sees this. The guy's got a massive following. I was actually thankful he reposted one of my tweets because I was tagging people because I did believe the Jeff Younger story should have been massive. But thanks everybody for being here. Once again, appreciate all of you guys being here too. And then there on screen too, you can see Worrell's page as well.
Yeah, I put them both on there.
But yeah, we'll catch you guys on Saturday, and we'll be looking forward to moving to a more regular schedule when we start adding in a bit more days. I know one thing that we talked about we need to catch back up on is porting this into an actual podcast format so people can catch in and listen to us after the fact. On other platforms like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, as well as getting clips up too. I think that's one thing we gotta start make a secondary channel, and we can start posting actual like clips and separate some of these up into some of the bit more focused topics that we cover. It's also nice to see you guys in here, Nights of Gideon. I know I haven't seen you guys go out in quite a bit. I haven't aired on Offensively Accurate in quite some time. I've been focused on this a bit more. But once again, we appreciate everybody for being here, and Christ is King, and God bless everybody.
Christ is King. We are the Jar Openers podcast. We'll see you guys on Saturday.
Let's roll rolling and let's talk. We here to bring the truth. Jar open this podcast. We breaking through the fake news. They try to silence us, but we will be subdued. We're bearded alpha males here to save the youth. Spitting fire on the mic with the bass Christian takes. Exposing the lies, keeping the demons at bay. We ain't afraid to speak up. We won't be swayed. Jar open this podcast where the truth is laid. Jar openers, cracking open the lies. We're rolling Atlas up. We're here to rise. Bearded alpha males saving mission to awaken the masses with our intuition, pulling out the corruption with no inhibition. Jar open this podcast, sparking a revolution. We're not afraid to stand tall in a world full of deceit. We're the voice of reason, bringing light to the street, keeping it real, never missing a beat. Jar openers podcast, where the truth meets the heat. Jar openers, cracking open the lies. We're rolling Atlas up, we're here to rise. Bearded alpha males saving the youth from the godless demons, spreading the truth. Jar Openers podcast, where the truth will never cease. Join us on the journey to bring back peace. We're rolling Atlas thugged, fearless in our release. Jar Openers podcast, where the lies will decrease.